Welcome to the Chateau podcast. If you don't know me, my name is Martin Depict. I'm a photographer, videographer based in Los Angeles. And for the last, I think 13 episodes now, this podcast has been sort of just me trying to find my footing back doing content. Now, I stepped away for a long time, and I do eventually want to talk about why I stepped away from content. I think it has to do a lot more with my psyche. And getting back into it has been an uphill battle. Not me shooting. I have been shooting. I think that my confidence as a photographer is at an all-time high right now. My confidence as a creator has never been this high, especially because I don't think I've ever stayed consistent with YouTube this long. One video a week for now over 6 months. I think last week was a little bit of a letdown just because I was working on a video and then DJI put out a firmware update that basically negated everything that I was saying in my video. So it became pointless to put out. Instead, I did do a live stream last week talking about the firmware update and how it fixed the DJI Pocket 4P. And I think it's honestly, I think I'm having a lot of fun with that camera, but I think nonetheless, this podcast has gotten away from what I want it to be about. I want to lead photographers and creators and videographers in the right direction. More importantly, creators that look like myself. I think a lot of the times when I go into a room, there's not a lot of people that look like me. And I think that immediately makes me go into my shell, and I get very, self-conscious about myself and my work and everything. But I think with the right people around me, I can go so much further. I think in a different universe, a very confident version of me is out there just dominating every shoot that I go into, working my ass off, is good at so many different things. And this version of me is just barely I'm still sort of dipping my toe into the pool. I think eventually I do want to tell that story, and I want to reintroduce myself in the correct way. I think the past couple months I've been very good at staying consistent, and I think that comes along with creative growth and confidence in front of the camera and everything. And I mention that almost every podcast, and I think it's time for me to step away from that. So in this podcast, I want to talk about something that's very important to me, and that is, it's not the full legal aspect of photography, but it is important that photographers should be aware of how usage rights and licensing and all that stuff works, because you don't want to be taken advantage of, especially now because AI adds another layer over that. Now, before I talk about usage rights and licensing, I do want to say that my view on this stuff is a little different. I've always sort of wanted this sort of fair ground between the photographer and the model. I don't think that one should have more power than the other. I have always sort of wanted to work with people that I know can have my back and I can have theirs. And then sometimes that comes to my detriment, where for example, that story that I told a couple weeks ago of the worst client situation I've ever had, that happened because that client trusted me to not share unedited images with the brand that we were working with. And because I had her back in that way, I think that sort of builds a relationship between me and the model. And so that hasn't changed. I've always sort of had I've always kept the same view when it came to content with models. If I'm working with someone and it's a collaboration, it's an exchange for, just us getting together for fun, getting some cool photos out of it, I think that those photos should be equally owned for both of us, right? Neither party should have the opportunity to make money from them without the other one's permission or without throwing the other person a cut. If I took a photo of a model and then went on to sell prints, I, one, want to get permission from that model to be able to do that. And then two, to be fair, I think that person should get a cut. Now, if I'm putting in all the legwork, if I'm putting in the cost of the ink, the paper, the frames, and the shipping and everything, it's not going to be a 50-50 split. That doesn't seem fair. But like a 10%, royalty for every print that's sold or anything, and setting it up to where for every 50 prints that it's sold, they get a kickback. It has to sell a certain amount in order for that payout to actually kick in. So there should always be like a level of fairness. Now, I have been in situations where I work with models and then they believe that the photos belong to them, and then they put the photos on t-shirts or start selling stuff on their website. And then I have to have a very uncomfortable conversation with them about like why I don't believe it's cool. And the person with the bigger ego, I don't think ever sees that like, oh, I'm doing something wrong. I think they see the situation and they think, well, like, the photographer should be happy that I let him take pictures of me and that the photos are being sold. And that's not necessarily the case. Because if I were to do that, if I were to sell prints or clothes or anything with a model's likeness on it, they wouldn't like it. If I wasn't kicking them if I wasn't paying them anything for it, or if I wasn't giving them a cut of something, they wouldn't like it. So it's clearly a two-way street here, but then the person with the bigger ego always seems to think that the rules don't apply to them. I don't only want to take the side of the photographer here. Like, I do know that sometimes the photographers do that to models, where the photographers sell prints and clothes with images and then they don't kick the model anything. Now, the way that it used to work, that the photographer always owns 100% of the image. Like, for example, the very famous image of Marilyn Monroe over that sort of like air grate, the photographer that took that, or at least took the one that made that image famous, that photographer has made a lot of money off of that one image, to the point to where he licenses that image out to publications or anyone that's willing to pay that licensing fee. And then you have companies like Getty Images, which is a company that holds the licensing for a bunch of images. So they work with photographers to pay them a fee for certain images, and then those images gets licensed out through them. And they sort of work as like a middleman, almost like an agency. So if you're a photographer and you take a bunch of photos of an artist, or go out somewhere and take really good photos of like let's just say Yosemite, for example. And then the photos that you take of Yosemite are so sought out after that a company like Getty Images comes to you and says, hey, we want to represent you and your images, then they can go on and license your images out for you and pay you every time those images get licensed. I think some images they do, it's almost like stock images where like you just buy the rights to the image outright, but there is sort of like limitations of what you can do with that image. So there is obviously one of my favorite photographers and someone who I look up to a lot as a Latino is Esteban Oriol. And his photo of he took a photo in the 90s of a Latina doing this, and he called that LA Hands. And that image is so widely recognized that people have thrown this on t-shirts, places like Urban Outfitters, places like Forever 21, fast fashion companies. There's something to say about copyright infringement and whether or not something, crosses into stealing someone's intellectual property. Now, that picture was so famous that for fast fashion companies to take that image and want to put it on t-shirts and stuff. Now, granted, they didn't put the actual photo on t-shirts. They did like a graphic of the hands on t-shirts and stuff like that. But there's a very compelling case for Estevan to make on where they got that image from. You know, how did that image become so popular? It was through Estevan's work. You know, have other people done this before? Probably. But for him to sort of be someone that whose image catapulted that sort of symbol, he could make a very compelling case on, you know, this is my intellectual property. This was my idea that I did with a model so many years ago. And because of that, you know, these companies owe me money. So then his people can go and confront these fast fashion companies for not taking the proper sort of steps to use that image. Again, I don't think it was Estevan going out and, you know, suing these companies directly. It was definitely his agency or his people that work for him to be able to do that. And Estevan, like many other examples, have won cases like that, because you can't just take someone's IP. There's obviously like tweaks and things that you can do to make it your own, but you can't steal someone's idea in that way. Once something has reached a certain level of popularity and people know you to be tied to that thing, there's an argument to be made whether or not, you know, you made this thing popular. Like photographers like myself that have shot models in, you know, lingerie or bikinis, or, you know, in sort of like these, in this very sexy way, we've been around for a long time. It's always been a thing. Like they've called it boudoir. I don't like sort of putting myself in that box because it's not all that I shoot, but understanding like that is sort of like the closest thing to that name. And then there's also like photographers who have done it, like Bob Guccione, who founded Penthouse and, you know, was a photographer that not only like shot the models himself and everything, and art directed and even did the makeup most of the time himself. You know, he sort of like oversaw almost every aspect of the shoots back in those early days. Now, we don't live in those times anymore. I think the times where I think models could be taken advantage of by corporations and sort of be paid like this very small amount or this very small fee, and then these corporations can make so much money off of their image. Like, it's part of the reason why companies like Playboy and Penthouse and Maxim and all these companies sort of like died out, is the fact that as time evolved and people started realizing how much an image could be worth, especially now because of social media, because although the actual tangible cost of an image has been skewed, because, you know, I think most people just see likes and comments. I think the big part of it is that image still can reach, you know, a certain amount of people. And that really depends on the person that's in that photo or who that picture is of. For example, Megan Fox, you know, she went away for a long time, started posting these photos very recently this year. And every time she posts, all those photos go viral. So is it the photographer's work? I think a little bit of that is, but I think a big reason of why those photos get so much reach is because of who's posting them. Now, we've sort of reached this new time where one person can post a photo and it could reach so many more people than what Maxim could do back in the day, than what Playboy can do back in the day. One post can get millions of impressions. And if you guys don't know what an impression is it being shown on your screen. That's an impression. So you don't need to click on it or anything. Like, if you're shown on it on your screen, that is one impression. So when she posts a photo now, that, like, does everyone like it? No. Does everyone comment on it? No. But how many people see those photos? There's probably people that don't even follow her that see those photos, because you know what? There's people that see that as a moment and run with it. They take that photo and then they repost it. And then publications like Complex and E News and TMZ, they take that moment and they repost it. Why? Because it gives them impressions and it gives their website clicks. It has sort of like turned everything upside down to where before models and photographers needed publications for the work to reach its masses. And now everything's being turned upside down to where we don't need the publications anymore. Print is dying out. The only ones that are still alive are the big fashion publications because they are the only ones still making money off of the print ads. And if you look at them, I have one here, hold on. This is a September issue of Vogue. Now, this is, look how thick that is. It's like, it's not a magazine anymore. This, and then most of this is ads. Chanel right here. John Hardy. Yves Saint Laurent. Victoria's Secret. Bulgari. Tiffany. It's just a book full of ads with a few stories sprinkled in. So the fact that this is one of the only publications that is still making money off of print, obviously because of who they are, they also have a big online presence. But like these big issues, like, and I believe they do it every fall and spring. I don't think they do it for summer. I'm pretty sure they don't do it for summer. I think it's only for fall and spring. These are my favorite issues to get because a lot of these ads are almost like they're almost like a reflection of the time. Like I can pull out an older magazine and you'll be able to see like the trend that was going on back then. Like I think in 2021 there was this huge trend of sort of like vintage, more raw images. And you can tell a lot of the photos were taken on either film cameras or they were made to look like film cameras. They just had like a lot of grain added to them. So it almost like they wanted you to feel the image. And then you get images like this now to where it feels clearly digital. Like everything feels so sharp and there's so much texture and the noise that you get in it doesn't feel like it comes from a film camera. It feels like it comes from post-production. Like it and we don't like, I would love to see the original to some of these images, you know, like what they look like before they get edited. But anyway, that's aside from the point. I think the fact that everything has flipped upside down and that creators now have, or not all of them, but some creators have the amount of reach that publications wish that they had back then, you know? And obviously like online publications are still a thing. Like you still have some of the biggest websites in the world making so much money, TMZ being one of them. And I think since everything has gone onto social media, their play isn't to make money off of the ads, but instead their play is to sell how much eyes they can put on you. And this, like, it's almost become a cheat code, like almost, and it's like, it's not even that you need to be someone special to do this now. Anyone could do this. Like I can pay $5,000 to get a model on the cover of FHM. The bigger the reach that those magazines or publications have, the more that they will charge. You don't need to be super famous to be on the cover of a magazine anymore. Like a lot of people pay for those placements. Think of your favorite model recently that was put on a magazine. Most likely, unless it's someone like Zendaya or Rihanna or someone that the publication is getting eyes on their publication in exchange for the image, they're paying for that stuff. Most likely your favorite influencer has paid to be on the cover of a magazine. Not even, and I'm not throwing shade here. I don't think that that's a bad thing. I think a lot of the times it's almost like a shortcut and a cheat code to get that blue check mark. Like, because in order to get that check mark for free, you need to have a certain amount of publications write about you. And how do you get those publications to write about you? You pay for them. it's not a bad thing. I think that I still have publications reach out to me of photos that I take, like the Sun will reach out to me every now and then and say like, "Hey, we want a couple photos of Jenna Frumes. Like, if you can send us some of the most recent photo edits," and then that'll come with like a 12-month licensing, and I will never do it without uh, the model's permission. And it's definitely something that I'm very transparent off, like how much they pay me and everything. Like, again, I want to keep my side of the street clean when it comes to this kind of stuff. Speaking of publications, I think there is something to say about agencies, because I'm not anti-agency, but I think when it comes to agencies, when it comes to photographer and models, like, photographers have talent agencies. Those agents will find you work, and depending on your portfolio and what you've done, or the connections that you have, uh, you can be a photographer that works a lot, which is awesome. I think the standard is 20%. So you get there's a fee that they take off the top of what you make. So like, if you are a well-known photographer and you're wanted to shoot like set stills, or you're wanted to shoot um, photos for a publication, that talent agency will get 20% of whatever the publication or the studio is paying you. I think like one of my favorite photographers is Annie Leibovitz, and obviously like she's a legend, been in the game for a long time. When she used to shoot for Rolling Stone, she was purely a documentary photographer. She would go on these tours with these rock stars, live the rock star life, and be sort of like a fly on the wall with a lot of these artists. And the photos that she was able to get back then are amazing. Those images have stood the test of time. They continue to sort of like propel her onto this, fame. Like, I mean, the level that she's at now, I think like at the peak of Annie Leibovitz's career, it was probably, I think it had to be during the Marie Antoinette movie. The Marie Antoinette movie was like, if you guys have ever seen it, it's a period piece on Marie Antoinette, and they shot that movie on like in the actual palace, in the Palace of Versailles, where Marie Antoinette lived. Now, after that movie finished shooting, Annie Leibovitz went, shot with the cast at the palace. Not a lot of photographers get to do that. It's just like it was this huge thing. And I think, I want to say Vogue or Vanity Fair published the photos that Annie took. And I think back then it was such a huge thing. There's a documentary on Annie Leibovitz, and there was cameras on set during the shoot, BTS cameras on set during the shoot. And you could see her shooting, what the process was like. She was shooting with like 3 different cameras. Insane. So at that peak, I want to say she was probably making, I want to say like minimum 6 figures a shoot, if not more, because that was when publications were making money. That's when they had the money to pay that kind of money. This was like, it was at the peak of everything, like ads were, everyone was making money off of print ads. It was really the most dominant way for publications to make money. And now with the introduction of the internet and everything, it feels like advertising is everywhere. Like it's to the point to where it's on Ubers, it's on Waymos, they're everywhere. Digital billboards are constantly changing. Like they don't even have to come and put up a new one now. It's just, they're just everywhere. Literally, they're on your phone, they're on your computer, they're in your email. Literally, they're everywhere. So now this like ad space, because there being so much ad space, everything got diluted. Coming out of that, transitioning into this new world, there was a lot of websites thinking that it was okay to publish photos on their website, on their publications, without paying for usage rights, without giving credit to the photographer or the person in the photos. And so what happened is that laws were passed. So every time that someone like TMZ or a website, even no matter how big or small, if a website is, for instance, like the Megan Fox photos, any website that posts a photo that doesn't belong to them, there's a couple things that they have to do. One, they have to get permission to use it because, for instance, anyone that posts a photo of Megan Fox or anything like that now needs to properly cite this is a photo of Megan Fox. This is the person who took it. But then not only that, they need to have permission to use it on their website. Now, because of the introduction of social media, it muddies up the waters, right? Like, what is proper citation when it comes to this stuff? Like, are photographers being tagged? Is the model being tagged in every one of her posts? What happens when you post stuff on these apps is that you have to agree to their terms of service, meaning that you give up a lot of those rights of whether or not the stuff can be plagiarized. And then this brings up what Meta just tried to do, which they just tried to have everyone opt in and agree to their terms of service and usage with AI, meaning that everyone was automatically opted in for Meta to be able to use any images that are posted on their platform for AI. It's my understanding that they've, went back on it and everything, but like, I think that it's only the beginning, and we'll see where it goes from here. But like, when it comes to like rights of the people's photos, like once you post a photo on social media, like, yes, you have rights to that image, tangible rights to that image. It's still yours, but can it be shared on social media by other people without tagging you? Yeah, there isn't really anything that you could do. You can probably request for those photos to be taken down. Like if someone posts it or is being a little bit malicious, you can report it to Meta, especially like if you're someone that pays like that $500 a month or whatever for people that are pretending to, like, for example, if you're a model and you post a photo, but then there's other people pretending to be you as well, posting the same photo, it's very easy for you to get those accounts taken down. Like, I think Meta has done a pretty good job of, making sure that no one steals someone's identity in that way, or at least pretends to be someone. And I'll say that with an asterisk because I'm not even really fully sure. Now, the usage rights now, as as I've sort of gone in this like really roundabout way to coming around to it. Now, I am, and people won't agree with this, but I'm a photographer that whenever I shoot with someone, obviously if it's for trade, like I said earlier, we both have ownership in that content. If I don't think that it's fair if they go out and sell that image in any way without getting my permission or giving me a kickback, and I don't think it's fair for me to do the exact same thing to the other person. That is sort of like base level stuff, right? Like, I think that that's just fair. Legally, the photographer owns the rights to it, yes, but I think like to keep my side of the street clean, I'm never going to do anything like that with anyone that I work with. I've never have, and I never will. If I'm ever selling anything, it's going to be with the permission of the person in the photo that I took. If I'm working with the publication and they're asking for rights, one thing that I think it's fair to ask is that they don't use my images to train any sort of AI. That's one. That I think that should go without saying, but I don't want my images put into a model to generate a bunch of other images or to learn from, because the fact is that those images are my IP. The intellectual property, it took my knowledge, my expertise, my everything that I've learned up to this point for me to take photos the way that I take. So if I take a photo, it is specifically the way that I saw that photo, specifically the way that I edited it, the way that I the whole outcome of the image was through a process that I have refined over time. That is my IP. Now, if someone's going to take that photo as although people may see it as just one thing, it's not just one thing for me. That is my experience. So if they're taking my experience, putting it into a model, and then having that model generate a bunch of photos from that, that is infringement. And I'm hoping that with the laws that get implemented at the end of this year, that I think I'm hoping that a lot of that stuff gets protected. I don't want to have to worry about my images that I post online or on social media or on my website even to be, opted into this thing that I did not agree to. Has it already probably happened? Maybe. And that's one thing about it, is that like you don't even really know. And I don't think any real changes will happen until it starts to affect the movie companies specifically. Again, like we've seen a little bit of it happen with sort of like the, AI movies being made with like Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise and stuff like that. Like the fact that it can do any of that stuff and use people's likenesses without permission, it brings up a really important point of all this stuff. And it is like, who owns your likeness? Like, is it you? What do you need to do? What are the proper channels that you need to do to protect yourself from this? If you're a model, if you're someone who has millions of followers, if you're a Kim Kardashian, how do you protect yourself from images being generated of you doing anything? When are those laws going to be passed to protect them? There's AI used to have these copyright things built into it to where like you couldn't create images of like licensed brands or anything. Or movies. So like if you would have asked it back then to do like an image of Darth Vader, it would say like, oh, this goes against our policies or our guidelines. Now what's happened is that these AI companies, for example, OpenAI, have come to agreement with a lot of these companies that own some of these licensing. Like Disney now allows OpenAI to create images of any character that they own. So like you can go onto ChatGPT and ask it to create original art with licensed characters, and it'll do it. It's not going to have any issue. So now like what protects those characters? What protects those artists? Every one of those artists, I'm sure, gets paid really well to do what they do. But at the same time, everyone deserves protection, like that, especially artists and people who create those characters, like they deserve to have rights to whatever they create. And that's the whole point here. You deserve to have rights on what you create. It doesn't matter if it's a re-envisioning of something, if you're inspired by something else. If you created it and isn't a complete blatant ripoff of something else, you have rights to that. That is yours. If you're in that image, you should have rights to it. That is yours. It's your likeness. There's so many horror stories that I've heard of, models getting photos sent to them on DM saying like, oh, look, you're on this billboard over here in Korea or something. And they're like, what the fuck? Why? Like, who did that? Why is my image on a huge billboard over there? Like, I'm not making any money on that. They didn't pay me for that, and that's scary. I don't ever want to be someone that is viewed as like taking advantage of someone. And I also don't want to be taken advantage of. So that said, when I work with someone, if they want, especially now because of the types of photos that I use, and a lot of the models that I work with now are selling those photos on paywall platforms, what happens is that they own 100% of those images. They pay for the rights to be able to sell those images. Now, I would not agree to them using those images for AI purposes. I just don't think that's fair. I think if they want to put images of themselves into AI, then it should be selfies. It should be photos that they take with their phone. But it should not be photos that are taken by a photographer to create other professional images. I just don't think it's fair. I think that there's there's a lot more that AI does to an image when it learns from it. It's not just the facial features or the person's body. It is everything. It is like in the metadata, like what aperture this photo was taken at, what time of day, where was this taken, all this stuff. Like photos now have GPS information, so like all this information can be uploaded into AI, and it all becomes information for it to learn from, and it's not something that I ever agreed to give up. So the models that I work with when it comes to that kind of stuff, they pay to be able to sell those images, and because of the nature of those images, you know, it's not my stuff to share. You know, it's their own stuff to share. And then like I there have been photos that I've taken that I feel are very artistic, and that maybe someday down the line I'll make like a coffee book of or something like that. And that will never be done without the model's permission or the subject's permission. But until then, you know, as of right now, the usage rights for those images are by the person in the photos, and they pay for that, and that's 100% okay. Now, if a publication were to come to me and say like, hey, we want you to take photos of this person, we'll pay for the flights and the shoot and everything, I was like, cool. Like, because you're paying for all this stuff, you're going to get a discount on the usage rights, you know, but I still want to get paid because I need to get paid for my time to shoot all this stuff. And you'll maybe get a 2-year usage agreement for providing everything else. But then after those 2 years, the photos go right back to me. It's not like how it used to be, you know, like how it used to be before is that Pamela Anderson would go to the Playboy Mansion, shoot with a bunch of photographers, and then Playboy would then own all those images and make all this money off of these images. And the only way for her to make money now is to go to fucking, you know, conventions to sign posters and stuff. And that to me isn't fair. Like it's her face, it's her body in a lot of these images. And a lot of the times too, the photographers sold their rights to those images as well. The Playboy owns that stuff. So in a lot of ways, you know, that sort of like that part of the industry died out. But then in some ways we do have AI to worry about now, where if we don't watch ourselves, if we don't protect ourselves, it could be something that steals people's likenesses. It could be something that steals intellectual property from artists, from photographers, from everything. And it's really important that whatever agreement that you agree to, just make sure that you're getting compensated for the usage rights. Never sell full rights to images unless you're being compensated fairly for it. If they want full rights for a lifetime, then make sure that you're getting compensated fairly for it. Like no one owns a photo of someone just because it's taken. I think legally, yes, like again, the photographer owns it. I think paparazzis have used this loophole for a long time, but artists have always been openly against it. They never agreed for their photos to be taken without their permission. And then next thing you know, the paparazzis are making thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars on images of like people getting out of cars and coming out of restaurants. It just becomes like this sort of, you know, it's disgusting. It feels like there's like bottom feeders. It's crazy that it still happens. If anything, it doesn't happen how it used to anymore. I think now, because of the nature of social media and publications, I definitely think a lot of these people call the paparazzi on themselves. Do the paparazzi still make the same amount of money? Probably not, but you know, it's still a way into the industry that they eventually want to be in. So protect yourselves, guys. Make sure that you guys know what you guys are signing, you know, have a lawyer read it over. At the very least, you know, put it into ChatGPT and have it tell you what the red flags are. That is what AI is for. It's for you to sort of like analyze things for yourself, not for it to analyze things and create stuff for you. Again, I think I will just say, like, I'm not against AI. I love AI as a tool. It will always be like a tool that I use. Like for example, I use it to create my thumbnails for the podcast, and I use it to help me uh, take notes, as I'm talking. I just have it listen to me, and it's just like, yo, take my notes and give me bullet points at the end. It's a very useful tool for that kind of stuff. Hopefully I shined a light on something, but like, I think I think I'll end with this because I have been going for a while and this camera's about to die. But if you're signing with an agency, make sure, whether you're a photographer or a model, make sure that they don't own the rights to your images, and make sure that they own a licensing of that image while you're working with them. So that way, when you leave with all your work with you. Protect yourself in that way. I think like for models and for photographers, know what you're signing. I think there's a lot of amazing agents out there, but then there's a lot of also shitty ones as well. I know a lot of people that, sign to these big agencies, but then, can't get work, and the same thing with models. Like they sign to these big agencies, but then the stuff that they're getting, sent are like small, ad reads or whatever it is. It's just, I think certain agents know, or the good agents will find you stuff that you are a good fit for. And that's what makes a good agent. But thank you guys for watching. I hope you guys learned something. If you guys have any questions, this is probably just like the opening to this. Like, there's a lot that I could keep going on and talk about licensing and the legal aspects of this stuff. If you guys have any questions, please leave them down below. Ask me anything on this topic. I will read all the comments. Happy to go back and forth. If you guys feel free to DM me and ask me questions as well. Let me know if there's anything that I can help with. I have shared my photo release before with other photographers and other models that needed just sort of like a baseline of stuff. So happy to help wherever I can. But I am working on a couple other videos, including another video for this thing, one that will not be shut down by a DJI firmware update. But other than that, I'll see you guys next week. And until then, keep shooting. Peace.